In 2021, the Carlton Football Club was plunged into the middle of no man's land by rogue executives for a plan they didn't commit to. Two men from Blue Abroad promptly escaped from their everyday lives in order to salvage what was left. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as private investigators for the members and supporters. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the PPI team.
Right, everyone, welcome back. Episode 2, PPI, Paolo and Pom Investigate. It was a huge success, wasn't it, Paolo, last week?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was one of the most anticipated and highly rated and most viewed shows on the Blue Abroad channel, Pommy. So I can't wait to do part 2. This is where we go right in depth with it all, and we've got a whole host of graphics and presentations that are going to help us all go through it. So I'm bloody excited, put it that way.
Oh, mate, we've gone up a level as well. We've got graphics. I reckon there's a Golden Globe in the offing. I reckon we've made it.
I'll tell you what, I think there was one dislike on the last video that we did, the first part, and someone in the comments said, Kane Little disliked this video. So I'm assuming there might be one or two more coming our way, but I sit in angst.
Oh, mate, I love a dislike. I love it because
I know you do.
Because if you dislike it, you've wasted some time watching me, and that validates my entire existence. More for you. But anyway, what we've done is, right, so we've recapped. If you watch the intro, there will be a brief recap of what we did. But that was the ghost of Carlton past. We covered how we got to today. And today is the ghost of Carlton presence. Ooh.
Ooh.
we love that. We love the ghost. You know, it was funny. Someone in the comments last time did say they were waiting for that door to start opening, like paranormal activity.
I've actually purposefully closed it, like properly. I think it was Fab from Ian Prendergast. I've actually purposely closed it properly. So
yeah, no, I can't wait for a ghost of Carlton's past just to fly through there.
There's nothing coming through, but it might very well do in the next hour.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, if it's a ghost of Carlton's past, it probably won't come through on time anyway, so we'll be all right. But what we're doing today is we're going to look at where we are today, right? How the rebuild has gone as we sit today. There's all sorts going on, isn't there, at the minute at Carlton as well? We've got EGMs, people launching rebellions for Carlton. It's almost like, you know, we've gone full Van Helsing on the situation. Great movie as well. So we're going to try and get into the bottom, though, of what matters. None of that politics rubbish. We're looking at football today and how we can fix it. So first, I've got some interesting slides for you. So this is the first one that we're going to look at, which is... Oh, no, it's not. There it is. Yep. The list model. So what we'll see here as we take it in is on the left-hand side, we've got the slide we talked about last week. So you'll see... The first part of it is all 18 teams in the AFL. So that is all the sides currently, and that is how their list is made up. The first one, percentage of non-drafted, that is the percentage of players used this year who haven't been drafted. The right-hand column is the percentage of games that accounts to players not drafted and traded in. At the bottom, we'll see the last 10 premiers. And at the top right, I think the most important slide for Carlton fans is the last 4 rebuilds and how long it took them to A, reach a final, and B, if they've reached a flag. So what do you think of that, Paolo?
Well, this actually came up probably, when did it come up? Probably maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago when I popped a post up on the Blue Abroad group, the blog that we actually have in the video in the Facebook on Facebook. And I noticed it was something alarming that really caught my eye. And the fact that, a lot of the premiership teams in the last sort of 10 years, in particular the Bulldogs team on grand final day, I think from memory, they only had 1 or 2 recruits from other clubs that actually played on grand final day in their win during 2016. And it sort of, they say, Pommy, curiosity killed the cat. And I thought to myself, I go, well, this is strange. I feel like there are a lot of recruits playing for Carlton, a lot of recruits from other clubs. So you've done your handiwork and gone into depth with all this, and we have been proven correct. Now, obviously, in the last 10 years, that recipe is not a recipe for success, and it's proven there. We have the highest percentage of non-drafted players, and basically, what is it, the second or the third highest percentage for percentage of games played by those players. So, look, is it a worrying sign? Yes. Can it be fixed? Yes, if they follow and go through what we're about to go through, Pommy. But I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, that's all part of the fun of doing this. We come up with these great ideas and they get put in the don't care bin with old mate Andy Tate.
Don't care. Just don't care anymore. Don't care.
Don't they? So, but I mean, it is important, though, to talk about that. If you look at all them sides did start where Carlton are. So we're about, let's just say, for argument's sake, we're at 38%. That all the sides slowly start to whittle it down. And as you could see in that graph, 2017, 2018, and 2019, Richmond, it slowly started to go down more and more as their players took over. So we're not saying it's a disaster, but we're saying at the state of play, it would suggest, based on historical data, Carlton are going to have to do something to make it in line, because no club, as you could see, had won the flag above a 30-odd% ratio. So, and that goes back to as long as the draft is around.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at it too. I mean, obviously, people are going to say, but what about the injuries? Maybe all those drafted players for us are injured, and maybe the senior blokes from other teams are playing better football at the moment. Granted, that might be the case, but it is not and we showed last week as well, or in part one, that the club steered away from really developing and entrusting that young drafted talent to get the job done. And that's what, we saw that with David Teague when he came in at the start. Ed Curnow started going through the middle. Mark Murphy started going back through the middle. We stopped the growth of Petrevski-Seton, O'Brien. Levi Casbolt went down back as well. So that sort of old guard that we speak about is what came in to try and get those short-term results. And Bolt's always said, he said, like, the win-loss threshold got to a point where it was too far gone. And he also said that he was thinking too far long-term, if that made sense. And then Teague's come in and brought in the short-term success. But I think clearly what's happened now is that he's gone and looked too close to the short-term. And now we see what the repercussions of this are. We have a list and a lot of recruits from other clubs that are taking up a lot more game time than what we would have hoped at the start of this rebuild. So, that percentage. So can you explain just for people what that first percentage is again? So that particular percentage there, that percentage of non-draft that Carlton has. So that 41%, just explain that to the people again so they understand it.
Okay, so the Carlton one, that's 41%. That first one, the percentage non-drafted. So that is the amount of players used this year. So players used, percentage of them that didn't come from Carlton recruitment. So Carlton's natural recruitment, one club players. The next one is percentage of games. So imagine that there's 23 games on available every week now with the sub rule that counts as a game. That's the percentage of games that have been a non-Carlton drafted player has taken up. So it works out roughly that 38% of games have been taken up by players that aren't. So you can see there an interesting example is Hawthorn. Similar percentage to us, but less players on the list. In the next graph, 32% of their list is is less than ours. So they've actually drafted theirs. So you can see they are in what we'd see a traditional rebuild, the start of a rebuild, that they have got a lot of young talent, but the older players are bearing the brunt as these younger players like your Downies and players like that get ready to take over from the senior stars.
And if you also look at our not drafted, so our recruits compared to the rest of the clubs, just that single figure number in the first left-hand column, it's the highest of any team in the AFL this season. So it's an alarming stat, Pom, but I think the fact that we found it is sort of an idea it's basically showing where our issue probably lies, and now we can come up with a way to fix it. And look at the two top teams in the AFL at the moment, Melbourne and Port Adelaide. Look at that stat. They're the argue in the top four, one of the lowest top four, top five for the lowest percentages. They play their draftees because they back in their development. And truth be told, they're reaping the rewards at the moment, aren't they?
It is, yeah. And it's interesting to note that if we look at the last four dynasties, particularly if we go to that champions, the last 10 champions, so Pies 2010 to Richmond 2020, it's important to note as well that traditionally when a rebuild occurs, it occurs in a Hawthorn mode. So Hawthorn, they won their last flag in 2015. They've had a little bit of nothing, been thereabouts for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And then usually there's still enough senior players on the list that come from a successful establishment who can handball that knowledge to the next wave. You got to remember, Carlton weren't successful till 1995. You would argue that rebuild was way too long, 2015. So what's that, 20 years after the last flag was when Carlton started to do it. So it was a very difficult job for Sauce. It's a very difficult job now for Nick Austin because basically, for a want of a better word, he had shit kickers on the list.
That's a fair point too. And we're a long way off. Are we a long way off finals? I mean, the trajectory from the teams that you mentioned there, Richmond, Brisbane, and us as well, and Hawthorn, the four teams that we've sort of built up and looked at as to where their rebuilds began. I mean, you look, Brisbane, it took them 6 years to make finals, and us, look at us. This was our 6th year, and we've missed out on finals by a fairly long way, I think. And I think argue to say that if we actually maybe had have stuck to the plan that we originally composed, or that Sauce originally composed, I think finals would have been a near certainty this year, judging by the projections and the percentages.
Well, it's hard to say where we are, but we do try and use the ghost of Carlton present today and using a lot of analytics. So I have got to, before I start this, big shout out to Bruce from Loughborough Uni, who did help me formulate the algorithm for what we're about to show you. So he did use his expertise to make sure that it all mirrored up and I was doing it right. So big shout out to you. I'll give you a shout out. So you owe me a pint when I go back to the old country. So there you are. Thank you for just staying on Skype and doing nothing. I
think Carlton are going to owe you about 20 cases if they follow quietly.
Tell you what, Carlton draft, I do it. So what we're going to do today is we have broken up the AFL into a pure numbers thing. And this is what it presented. So based on from 2010, we're going to call this the AFL God's thumbprint.
This is brilliant.
So every side since 2010 has had, from outside the 8 to get into the 8, this has been the 4 stats that jump out on the screen for these sides to jump from. We're talking 13th to 8th. We're talking 14th to 8th. All the sides that have done it have a similar denominator. It even gets more complex when you look at 8 to flag. This kind of mirrors itself. So to use a golf analogy, we always say that the top players in the world are just better from 100 meters in. So everyone else's game is the same. I drive the ball as good as Tiger Woods. 100 meters in there, that's where the best are the best. So this is kind of the AFL's equivalent. So one of the things we see is 1%ers. 1% is about a 10%, 9% increase. Midfield tackle numbers, 11.2%. Forward tackles, this is huge.
Massive.
44.1%. And clearances to advantage. So you can see here two jump out at you. It's the mid tackles and the forward tackles are really, really huge. And you can see there, the Carlton logo's there. Just keep that in mind, the Carlton logo's there. But go on, Paolo. How do you take that in at first value?
Well, it's you know what, and this has been a big issue for us all year, and I've spoken to ex-coaches about this as well with where we see what the actual football team values from the way that they play and the style and the brand that they want to represent on the field. And I can tell you now, and the stats prove it, what this team does not value 1%ers. And how many times have supporters, members, and pundits in the media as well, and us too, have talked about, does this team genuinely tackle? But do they apply the pressure? And where, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here, but where do we actually rank for tackles in the AFL, if that makes sense? I think are we 16th. Well, there you go. Therein lies part of your problem as well. And I'd vouch to say that we'd be in the bottom 5 or 6 for midfield tackles, as well as tackles inside 50. So where do we sit on the table for midfield tackles as well as forward tackles, Pommy? I'd vouch to say that it'd be probably bottom 5 or 6.
Yeah, so 12th for midfield tackles and was 17th for forward tackles.
Says it all, doesn't it?
It's well, I mean, there it is, isn't it? And it's the forgotten part of the game. And I think what is really interesting, what not a lot of people talk about with tackles in the forward half particularly, is that this helps the rest of your game. If your defense happens in the forward half, it's buying you time all around the ground. It's buying you time all around the ground. And it's really important to note that a lot of people have tried to do this, and I've spoken to a lot of people about trying to find a God's thumbprint, and they get confused because a lot of the key metrics that the AFL talk about, rebound 50s, intercept marks, meters gained, they fluctuate so much purely because obviously the ball's spending less time in the back half. But these are the 4 that are consistent. One we haven't mentioned, which in the last 10 years has gone up by 11%, is intercept marks in itself, which is a product which we'll talk about a bit more in depth when we go about teams that have stumbled across this by accident. But intercept marks are another one, which incidentally Carlton are one of the top sides in the competition at doing. So there is one of these confusions when we look at stats. People will say, well, intercept marks are the key ingredient to winning a flag. They are a massive ingredient, and history will tell you. But without the other ingredients,
correct,
you just got intercept marks.
Yeah, exactly right. It needs to be, it needs to also be in tandem with that forward pressure and that forward press you put on as well. Because, I mean, if you're intercept marking inside your defensive 50 or towards your, full back square, that just tells you that the opposition are completely just pushing you back and you're up to your last line. What I think the key is here is that if you actually put that forward pressure on ahead of the ball, that wall, that defensive wall you set up can set up in the front half of your ground, and that's where you get your intercept from.
Oh, spot on. And you've got to see as well that it really does. It really transcends everywhere. If you watch Carlton this year, I would say since 2020, when Teague's had these run-ons, it has started in the forward half. We ranked dead last for scores defense in transition. And that is why, because there is no one stopping a transition occurring. We are literally sitting ducks. We look really good. We're the archetype school bully. We look really good when we're picking on the year 7s. But when one of them year 7s has a year 11 brother with a tattoo of I love my mum, and the joke is the mum hasn't been alive for 10 years, he's just kept her in a basement, they don't look very tough. And that's what Carlton look like. And that's where you need that forward half pressure. You need your own big brother.
Yeah, exactly right. And we don't have that, and we haven't had that all year, and we didn't have it throughout 2020. And probably the ladder speaks for itself now. So now it's about finding a coach who can implement that game style and set us up with a rigid defensive structure that is also based inside our forward half as well. I mean, you need to defend the forward half too, Pommy.
Oh, 100%. And what we can do is, you said style of play. I like that. You're good at this. You're a good co-host. Because that leads us on to the style of play, state of play today. And these are the key metrics for every line. So you don't have to take too much into this, because I have streamlined it for you in the next slide. But basically, this is line by line, every key stat we've talked about into them. So what the raw data is telling us. And this is what it breaks it down to. So what this has done is we've created kind of like a money ball based around this. Mm-hmm. So with the historical data for the back line, it's indicating that the natural progression of someone like Kemp. Now, Kemp's a really good example for this, because when we go into the detail of the other rebuilds in this situation and what they did in trade and draft time, this is a key area you've got to look at, is the ability to increase this on your list. So Carlton ranked pretty good for the defensive metrics. Obviously, like you say, we're getting at the moment, our midfield is more open than your Tinder DMs. So, of course, the back line is going to get a lot of numbers. But players like Kemp are an interesting proposition. 7-1% as this year, 4 intercept marks. Actually has him highly rated if he did that for the rest of the year. With the added benefit, he's an exceptional user. And we've used here an example. Marcus Adams came in for Brisbane. Now, people talk about Lockie Neal a lot that year. Marcus Adams came, and you look at the defensive numbers for Brisbane. Marcus Adams isn't an exciting player, but boy, did he do his job, because he was able to lock down players, free up Witherden, free up Payne and the other guys to really go hard and attack the ball, but also himself was a very good loose third tall. So sometimes this is what you've got to look at. Just a little bit of moving the pawns you've got in place can make a dramatic difference.
This is where I think Brody Kemp, and we have made mention of him being the utility, and question a lot of people have been questioning Pommy as to why he's being played down back. And look, I'm not sure if they've gone into this type of depth with it as to the reason why they're playing him down back. But if you are able to get a guy like Brody Kemp to come in and replace someone like Lockie Plowman, which I think we could say is not really the like for like, but I think Brody Kemp is and will be a much better footballer than what Plowman is. And I'd vouch to say that he's going to be a much better intercept player than him as well. And it allows someone like a Jacob Wiedering to be completely free. And we know how good a user of the football Jacob Wiedering is. And I mean, a player with sort of the brilliance that Wiedering has as a number one pick as well, and the grace he shows on the field, his ability to be able to use the ball and start the rebound 50 chains with that penetrating kick, I think is something that is going to have to be utilised going forward for us to really become a premiership contender. And as well, looking at Kemp too, he can also be the player that uses the ball across half-back and as the intercept too. We've seen through his junior years as well. He's an elite user of the ball. I know there were a few times when, on I think it was his second game, he might have fluffed a few kicks and all that, whether or not that's just nerves and the pressure getting to him. But I think as he progresses, he is going to be such an integral part of that back line and how we set up as with regards to our intercept, and then that leading into our push forward inside 50, Pommy.
Spawn, and you've got to just think that I want everyone who's watching this to get into the mindset that because there's an issue, right? It doesn't mean you've got to go out and buy it.
Exactly right, and this is the biggest thing that I think people are going to take from it, and this is the biggest thing that I found out, and I think you found out doing this.
Yeah, definitely.
So, people saying that we need to spend the farm on midfielders and forwards and all that. I think we need to look at this area, and there are players lying on the list such as Kemp that can fill these voids and get into this area, these metrics, these 4 metrics that need to be improved in order for us to get back up there.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. It is really important that when we look at this, that we think about it in a logical way. You can't keep buying eventually you're going to have to get a return on investment.
Correct.
And we've invested a lot into a lot of these players. There's a lot of players on our list at the moment that we've invested a lot of time, a lot of manpower, and it comes a point where you've got to ask yourself, it's not all doom and gloom. And that's what I think is funny when you actually look at it, that it's not all doom and gloom like the media say. It really isn't. People think it is, and people want to say it is, but in reality, sometimes it can be just as simple as one player comes in and it allows the kid or the junior to go off. And it's quite simple.
The prime example of this, and you can see, and Port Adelaide are a premiership favourite. Look at what they did to their backline. They brought in Alia, who has been prolific with his intercept marking ability this year, and it's freed up a lot of their other backs. And then you look at who they brought in up forward, Pommy, Fantasia. Now he was a revelation for them in that final against Geelong, and those are one of the two areas. A high pressure forward, a high pressure small forward, and then an intercept defender who can free up everybody else. And boom, look at the team. I mean, Alia is the man that pretty much he is the start of all the play. He sets up everything, Pommy.
Oh, spot on. And this goes into it a bit detailed. So we've talked about the pure numbers and the backline. I wanted to pick on the backline first because the red numbers are the numbers that are saying this is where Carlton, what they need to improve it by. So you can see here that the 1%ers from the ruck need to improve by about 45%. Clearances need to go up by 16 and hit out to advantage only 3%. Tackles inside 50, 36, 8% and 13% for the forward line. So you can see the core of what a forward line does isn't so bad because these are all linked. So your inside 50s, they go up in the midfield. Your shots will improve. Your marks inside 50 will improve. They're all organic. It's the tackles inside 50, though, that have a knock-on effect. Now, I want you to see the orange numbers in the back line. And why are they orange? Now, the orange numbers are there because genuinely these drop. So when you are a good team, these drop quite significantly as well. Good news for Carlton is, though, there's a bit of Richmond about them numbers looking at them because they're so high, even though they're under the cosh, that it suggests even when they drop down, which is about 13.1% for intercepts and 16.8% for 1%ers in the back line, they're still going to be rated as elite in the AFL.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that number is clearly an outlier because we just, our deepest defenders they are under the pump all the time. And that statistic that's popped up as well, Pommy, with regards to the amount of one-on-ones that Jacob Wiedering and Liam Jones contest in and the amount that they actually win. And this came to me at the end of last year as well when they were ranked very highly and they were ranked 1 and 2 and they were complete outliers from the rest of the competition. And it begged the question. I said to myself, why is that such a high number? And clearly there is a breakdown up forward of the field, which leads to us and our defenders being isolated in those one-on-ones, and it leads to Jacob Wiedering and Liam Jones having to be one-on-one rather than actually peeling off their man, coming across, taking the intercept mark higher up the ground.
Mate, you've nailed it. And I mean, I think it's really important as well when we think about this as well, that these one-on-one stats, they sound pretty.
They sound fantastic, but I think it's huge cause for concern.
Mate, it sounds impressive, but it also says to me there are a lot of attempts at one-on-one, which says two things to me straight off the bat. Poor defensive structure and poor ahead of the ball structure that are allowing it. So a great example, and we'll go and have a look at this. There's two teams here that had used kind of to show examples. So this is the model that is Richmond. Now, Richmond are a really interesting case study for 2016 to 2017. Mm-hmm. Now, they sacrificed Brett Delelio, who was an absolute phenomenal footballer. And it secured players that they fit the bill. Now, we know they went out and got Bolton and Jaden Short was promoted off the rookie list. Some really good players. But it was interesting. They brought in Nankervis, Prestia and Caddy. And you actually look at these green numbers, these are the numbers that increased for them to get into the finals berth. And they, again, hit God's thumbprint. And it's like you say, look at the defensive numbers. The defensive numbers actually went down. Marks inside, defensive 50 went down, rebound 50s went down, and the intercepts go up. And again, that is that grey stat down the back I want everyone to think of. Marks across the board went down, intercepts went slightly up because their average kick in went down by 11 meters. So the distance for an inside 50 was now further back by 11 meters. That is a long way. And you think about it, you push someone back 10 meters, the accuracy dies dramatically.
Correct. And that is all to do with defensive structure ahead of the football, which is something we clearly lack because of, look at that pressure that we put up, inside our front half. It's simply not good enough. I mean, what was it? Minus 36% is where our inside 50 tackles lie and our inside 50 pressure lies. And therein lies our problem, Pommy.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Richmond here, right? It's really important to think of how this works. I want you to picture their list makeup. Nankervis came in, real tough around the ball. Really, he's not the most attractive ruckman, but you watch what he does. He's highly effective, and in my opinion, one of the most underrated ruckmen in the competition because he makes a contest around the ball. He drops it down, he puts it where there's numbers, and it's instantly a 3-on-3 fight for the ball, which if you've got a good midfield, they brought in Prestia, who is probably one of the best players one-on-one in traffic in the competition. He finds a way to get the ball. He's a little meatball. He's tough. He really stops you getting out with the ball. He either gets it himself and he stops it. And they added Caddy, who's an interesting one because that year he played on the wing. He played on the ball. He played up forward. He was the real go-to man. Wherever there was trouble, they deployed this guy as their outlet, their freedom that allowed them to do it. And I think the case in point here, look at the tackles inside 50.
Oh, mate, I was just about to say this. It's an enormous jump. It's huge.
It's almost two different teams. It's such a big jump. It's a different team.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. And people might think, it's only 6-7 tackles. But those extra 6 or 7, it's an extra stoppage. It's an extra couple of stoppages. It's an extra chance to set up behind the ball. It's an extra chance to have a shot at goal. And what do we say? The inches matter, Pommy. And the one extra tackle matters. Another extra tackle matters. It's all those little inches that add up to the bigger picture. And that tackles inside 50 can. And you saw the way Richmond modelled themselves in 2017. It was all their smalls that did the damage. Castagna, Rioli, Butler, all those types of players that absolutely slaughtered opposition inside forward 50 with regards to the forward pressure they put on and the tackles inside 50, as we clearly see with these stats.
Oh, and you think about it, that year as well, that year, you had Jacob Townsend, 2 tackles inside 50 a game, Miles, 1.4 tackles a game, Butler, 1.4, Rioli, 1.3, Jack Rewalt, 1.3, Castagna, 1.3, Jack Graham, 1.3. And then a guy that people always forget, Mr. Grigg,
yes,
who Nankervis replaced as the full-time ruck, allowing Grigg to play at the same time and throw it across the forward line. He was in the top 10 for that as well. So you can see how one innocuous acquisition changes the whole dynamic of how a team plays, because effectively all that's changed from 2016 to 2017 is they've lost a superstar in Brett D'Alio, who is a superstar, and he was at the time. They brought in Nankervis, Prestia, and Caddy. And Prestia, remember, at Gold Coast, was kind of a hit-and-miss player, but he could tackle. And you saw how that changed their dynamic. They went from a team skirting the 8, many people saying Gale was going to get deposed because he'd promised the flag. And they stormed with it. And you've got to remember, 2017, probably the close to perfect football because Prestia and Caddy roaming through the midfield with Cochin as well in a redeveloped behind the ball role allowed Dustin Martin to become the floater. And we all know what happened when Dustin Martin became the floater, don't we?
Well, yeah, he basically pulled everyone's pants down and said, "I'm the best player in the competition, and I'm gonna win a flag by myself."
Exactly. And I mean, it's not just that case here. We look at Brisbane as well, 2018 to 2019. Now, Brisbane's my favourite one to look at because a lot of people go, oh, well, it was Lachie Neale. Lachie Neale came in and he changed their game, right? Which isn't true because if you actually look at their statistics of where they improved, tackles inside 50 were huge. Clearances from their forwards, so this is stoppage clearances, improved dramatically. Contested possessions went up. Shots on goal went up. And a big one here is intercepts in the back line. And look at the players they brought in. Marcus Adams, McCarthy, and Jared Lyons. Now, it's important when you look at Marcus Adams because we talked about him. He freed up their backmen to really do that role. They had an extra interceptor there, a big body, allowed them to do it. But McCarthy and Jared, particularly, huge acquisitions for these numbers because it allowed other players to go into roles. So you found Mitch Robinson started to go to more of a wing role and looking to stop and irritate players. You saw Charlie Cameron was now dropped into the pockets. So he was no longer coming deep for the ball. He was at the coalface. A lot of changes eventuated that Lachie Neale wasn't really responsible for. He was more the icing in these deals.
And this is what we lack at the moment. I think people at the moment think that we need the icing, whereas we actually need these grunt type players to actually come in and get those tackles up, get those tackles inside 50 up, and also the ability to be able to free up guys like Walsh, maybe guys like Williams. And there were a few interesting things that you said about Williams as well, that his numbers when he actually went through the middle were actually not that bad. It was just the fact that we didn't have any of those real grunt type players or enough of those grunt type players to be able to really fully optimize a player like Zach Williams roaming through the middle.
Well, I mean, spot on, because if you look at their midfield, you look at the two key performers really for them, Zorko and Neale, in that year after. We've kind of got them already at Carlton because Walsh is a very Lachie Neale type player. You actually incidentally look at his numbers at Fremantle. Walsh, you could make a great argument, is the superior footballer of the two at the time. It's bearing in mind he won a Brownlow a couple of years later. But you talked about Zach Williams there, and I think Zach Williams is a really interesting case for me because when he was in the midfield, he was averaging 4.1 tackles a game, which puts him third on Carlton's midfield list.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. And you know, we even saw what he did during the preseason against St Kilda, where I think he sort of had 23 to 24 disposals and he kicked 2 goals, being at the coalface of the ball as well. And we also saw him come in against Collingwood in round 2 and he lit the park alight, you know, in sort of the first couple of quarters. And I think with a couple of extra bodies in there, I think he is going to be a player that really frees up. And I actually do think just by doing this and the research we've done prior to this, I actually think he can become the midfielder that we need him to be. And we've even said, Pommy, you don't need guys to be getting the ball 30 to 35 times. It's about the efficiency and what they do with it.
Well, the AFL fan base, the AFL media is really archaic, and they focus a lot on disposals for midfielders, which are probably the most pointless stat in AFL. To use it in perspective, in soccer, you have not been graded on touches since 1978. So bear in mind, a midfielder in a scouting report now, they don't look at the amount of times a player gets the ball since 78. Now, that's not me taking the piss. That's 33. That's what, 43 years.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing where it's like, you know, people say, oh, you know, they had more inside 50s than the opposition, but they still lost. Well, inside 50s are pointless if you're not using the football properly, Pommy. You know, it's all about efficiency. That's what it's all about. It's about being smarter and better for longer.
Like you look at Zach Williams' numbers, they're quite interesting. The first 3 games when he was deployed more as a midfielder, looking at his preseason games, including there as well, that they were better than Dow. And Carlton fans always drum on, give Dow a chance. Now, I think they dropped a ball with Zach Williams because in his own admission, he wasn't ready to be a midfielder. He said it was a job that he was going to learn. So after the round 3 game, he said he's not ready for it. He's still a work in progress. Now, Carlton then came out and David Teague said, well, we're going to play him off the halfback flank and hopefully there'll be opportunity for him to move back into the midfield. Again, this is what Carlton do. They don't persevere with it because really at that stage, it should have been, we're paying 800k. You're a midfielder. You're either going to get it or you're not going to get it. But you have to get it.
Yeah. I mean, the argument there is that, well, you know, if they don't do that grunt work, and it was similar to with like a guy like Stocker, and, you know, they say, oh, well, you know, as a midfielder, we want to teach him to defend by playing in defence. Why can't you just teach him how to defend by playing in the midfield? Just show him, like, to defend in the midfield, this is what you need to do, and we're going to entrust you with that. But I think, too, as a fan base, is that do you go ahead and go with that, with the idea that results may not go your way in the short term, and then the fan base, the upheaval begins and everything. But then that also comes back to the club selling the message, Pommy.
Well, you see, I think personally what the message is it's a scapegoat. And I think any player this year, the players have been used as a scapegoat. And I already see it in the media now. They wheel out the old players, you know, they go to Carlton's old folks home, knock on the door and they say, which one of you we're going to parade today? And we've had it this week, you know, ex-players coming out and saying it's the players' fault, not Teague's. Don't believe that bollocks. Don't believe that bollocks. That game plan is probably one of the worst things I've seen with my 2 eyes. It's probably top 10 worst things that have ever happened to humanity, that game plan. It would be close. Like, the Israelites look at that and they shudder.
Well, Pommy, you mentioned it too. You were doing your own external review through the year, and you had the answer in what, round 2? The game was terrible.
People are worried about Teague and how he's feeling. He should feel good. I'm not his boss. He would have gone round 2.
Yeah, well, and then when the external review came out, what was it? The first point that said that the game plan, or the players found the game plan confusing, and there was a lack of defensive aspect in the game plan. I mean, it was all of us were harping on about it, and then that's come out. And everyone's saying, "Oh no, it's the players." You know, give Teague time. Like, it's. I mean, he had 17 to 20 rounds to figure it out. And you know, I think was it Riley made mention of Teague's press conference before the actual season started when he said, "Oh, you know, if the opposition kick X amount of goals, we're just going to kick more goals."
Yeah, the old Kevin Keegan. Yeah, we'll kick one more goal than you. That's our defensive plan. You kick 5, we kick 6.
Yeah, well, he's taken the mantra that offense is the best form of defense. When that doesn't work for you, you see North Melbourne getting out the back and Jaden Stevenson having a cup of tea, doing up his shoelaces, and then snapping a ball on his left with with no one on him, really.
Has anyone ever seen the film Zulu? That's based on the Battle of Rorke's Rift, where basically the British were told to just stand the ground, given an extra tot of rum, and fight till the last musket. That is basically Teague's defensive plan. Like, we're going to die, but we've got a shitload of rum. And we're just waiting for Michael Caine to come in and be like, stop throwing those bloody spears at me. I mean... But that's the case. And like what I'm saying there is, you actually look at Zach Williams' midfield numbers: 20 touches, 4 tackles, 5 inside 50s. That is top 3 every game in the midfield for Carlton Football Club since he was dropped.
Well, there you go.
So it's not like we're carrying him, because I know the argument is, we can't carry dead wood. Well, there's been a shitload of dead wood we've carried this year. We've carried Lockie O'Brien. We've carried Mark Murphy at times. We've carried Eddie Betts, God bless him, at times where he hasn't done things. There is always a player we carry. But if you're telling me the worst midfield game for Carlton Football Club is 20 touches and 4 tackles, which was the evidence we were presented at the time, right? Before he had that 13 disposal game. Bear in mind, he had 1 bad game. And everyone's like, he's not a midfielder. But his first 2 were pretty good. Like, yeah, exactly. Like if we took a person now in the draft and their first 2 games were 20 touches and 4 tackles, people would start saying Walsh too.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think this too in lies without, I think even myself included, is that, I was sort of upset and angry that he wasn't having that match winning ability, or that he wasn't showing that match winning prowess that, we're paying him for. But when you actually strip it back and go and look at the numbers and actually look at what the evidence is suggesting, it would suggest that he's actually not as bad as what people may think. Granted, look, there was some footage of him this year from a defensive point of view that you were left scratching your head at. And look, that is inexcusable, clearly. But, look, he has, and this is no excuse for him, because I've probably been one of his harshest critics, as you've seen on the jumper punch. But I think from our point of view now, it's all about get his body right, get his tank up, and don't let him be that. He doesn't have to be the guy that gets it 30, 35 times a game and kicks 3 goals a game. It's not what this is a team, Pommy. It's all about, okay, well, these are your strengths. We utilize these, and then whatever your weaknesses are, we're going to have people in there to back you up, because that's what a team is, Pommy. Not everybody is going to be, the elite in every single category of every single statistic that we have that, makes the whole package of a football club. You have weaknesses, you have strengths, and you get better. Those weaknesses become, you mitigate those weaknesses by players that you recruit.
Oh, 100%. And I'm not saying Zach Williams is a bargain. I don't want anyone to jump in the comments and go, Pom's saying he's a bargain. What I'm saying is, though,
we expect more from him. Yeah.
You've got to get a return. And I go back to Zach Merritt. Do you remember 2 years ago where people were questioning his defensive intent? Do you remember that he had them arm-out tackles, them efforts, and he was panned? He went away and worked on it, but what did Essendon do? They stuck with him. They trusted their process. The coach defended him and said he does expect better, but he's backing his player in to prove it. And Zach Merritt now is one of the best midfielders in the competition. Like, he is easily top 5 in the comp. So what I'm saying is with Zach Williams is he admitted he wasn't a midfielder. He admitted it was a part-time role for him. He was now thrust into the full-time role. He didn't ask for 800K. Carlton gave him it. So for me, if you're willing to give him 800K, they obviously see what these stats are suggesting. He has a good base that potentially could pay us back in the long run. So I think, like you say, defending is totally different down the back than at the midfield. And why aren't you just throwing him there? Why aren't you throwing him to the Wolves? He's not a young player. He's been around, so he can't have this mental issue that people say where it's like, oh, you'll kill his confidence. He's been around the block. He's played grand finals. He knows what it takes. So surely, under the right leadership, right protection, Ed Kerno behind him, maybe giving him a little bit of backing and say, look, go hard, my friend. You never know what you're going to get. Because I'm telling you now, if every one of your midfielders presented 20 touches, 4 tackles, you win flags.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And look, I think we look at it too. And, you mentioned it just then, is that defending in the back line is completely different to defending in the midfield, right? You're not, I mean, as a midfielder, you're not contesting aerial balls, left, right, and center. You're not asked to, do that, right? Midfielders aren't asked. The defensive aspect from a midfielder is holding your ground at stoppage, tackles around the stoppage as well, and then setting up to mitigate the opposition in that regard. And then it's also running back as well. And I mean, you mentioned it too off air, a couple of, like you said, like two-way running is the most overrated thing, or the biggest bollocks that you can mention in football, isn't it?
You see, I don't get it. I don't get it, because all these players are fairly fit. You've only got to look at their draft combine, right?
And look at the numbers on the trackers. Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? There's not many of them that are turning up, like your Uncle Alf, who's going to play 11th man in the second 11. Right? Do you know what I mean? They're all pretty healthy blokes, right? Yeah. But what I'm saying is most teams, though, utilize players to aid this. So you look at someone like, I can think of a good example here, Jordan Clark, who's learning from the great Isaac Smith. Sometimes you watch him track back. The guy is tracking back with the intensity I get out of the car to my mother-in-law's. Like, he's lagging behind. He doesn't want to get out of the car. He's just nicked one of the kids, so they start crying, so I can say, oh, we're going to have to take him home. Like, But what do they do? What do they do? They have situations in play. They have Zach Tui behind him who never misses a tackle. They have set situations up to know that Jordan Clark has his moment of magic, though. That's a goal. They just need to stop the moment of madness. And my question is, you're telling me Carlton, Luke Parks was never beaten one-on-one with a guy with the ball on the ground. He was killing it. You tell me we can't do that? Like, is that hard that someone sacrifices their game? And that would be my question. It's roles. And that's what Carlton need to get their head around now. Fuck your superstar names. You are now just merely pawns in my little game.
Exactly right. And this is where it comes down to team. And this is where it comes down to the stopgaps as well. And Eddie Betts said it in our tribute. He said this Carlton team is more talented than the list that he went to a grand final with in Adelaide. But what the first thing he said was Adelaide players, they all had their role. They all knew what they had to do, and it was the system, within the football club and on the pitch that got them where they were. Look, granted, they obviously didn't win the flag, but they got to the day.
Yeah, and it's not the players' fault that the roles are defined by the coaching group. Because at the moment, the only roles David gave any of these players was, a 24-pack of sausage. You know what I mean? Like it's mental.
Yeah. And look, I mean,
deserves more that, Paolo. Deserves more.
I'm sure you get some reactions in the live comments. But look, the question that everyone's saying, "Oh, why did they sack him? Why did they sack him?" I'm always of the opinion. Ask the other question: why did they hire him? That's the question too. And based on the evidence, I mean, people were saying, "Oh, he's got the same win percentage, or he's got a better win percentage than Clarkson and Hardwick did in their first couple of years." Yeah, but they didn't inherit a list that was, 5 years, into development, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And the plans that they set in place were premiership winning plans. These aren't.
Well, you got to remember, he was the fans' number one choice.
Correct. Was.
You know what I mean, that's it though. You case in point, and we're talking about midfielders. What does this data tell us about midfielders? So, based on historical data, we're going to need one midfielder who averages around 5 tackles per game. This allows players with higher natural clearance potential, such as Dow, to have more space via separation at contest. Now, what I want you to look back to is the Port game and what that means by separation. Ollie Wines is is a genius at this. He'll get the ball, he'll handball it out, and then he physically uses his body to stop 2 people coming to that clearance. And what that allows is space for you to run. Now, with Dow, you don't want him beating players one-on-one. You want him to run as hard as his little heart can carry him through into open space. You don't want him messing about, pissing about with Mitch Robinson. You want him literally doing a gingerbread man running away. You just want him off on his merry trots. And that's what we're looking for.
That's when he plays his best football as well. I mean, go back to his scouting report, Pommy, when he first came into the scene. Explosiveness away from the contest. Not, I've got to wrestle with this guy, I've got to wrestle with that guy. It's set the play up so your explosive spread players can benefit the most and they have a whole patch of grass to run into rather than having to, worry about the bloke up there ginger, basically. And I mean, if Dow gets in the clear, no one's catching him.
Yeah, and remember he was linked to Paddy Dangerfield as well by ESPN's Nightmare Report, which you don't read into it too much, though. Noah Bolter was likened to Jared Waite. So
you can understand where they're going with it, though.
I can't. I'm glad you can. Well, has Bolter got a famous dad? He was in the KGB, evidently. What's going on?
No.
What's going on? Honestly, never read them reports, ladies and gentlemen. That's like saying Dan and Brad Pitt have a lot in common. They've both got a working face. So let's look at the forward. Oh, wait, that's not the forward line. Let's look at the forward line then. So the forward line is saying that based on the historical data, Carlton will have to hope on natural progression. Now, this is a huge issue for us. Bearing in mind, we have to be over 30% in tackles. There's a lot of issues for our small forwards. Now, a lot of it's going to rely on the presence of Honey and Durden at the moment. Now, Kerno, incidentally, is very high tackling for his size because he's very mobile. You've also got to rely on that a little bit. But the forward line numbers at the moment are below what we'd expect a natural expectation for a jump into the finals. Losing Eddie, remember he was AFL average or below for tackles and pressure as well inside 50. That doesn't help. So we've got to get creative here. We've got to get creative here. I want you to remember that word, the C word, creative.
Yes, that's exactly right. So I think Durden is the clear pressure, high tackle, high pressure forward, small forward that we need. Now it's just about getting that times 2. How we do that, I'm not too sure. But a name that could come to mind, and he was Brent. Look, I mean, we don't know how this is going to work out, and we don't know what the contract situation is. But Jordan Boyd from the Western Bulldogs, the guy that we picked up in the VFL, was touted as a small forward. So I don't know if they try to go down that path with him. But I think at the draft this year, they need to go after a high-pressure small forward or a high-pressure mid-forward that can deliver that pressure inside the forward 50 as well as those tackles inside forward 50, which is a massive factor in that AFL God's print.
Oh, definitely. And I would say someone like Durden and Honey both are showing the signs, because it's not a lot of tackles. I want you to get your head around the tackles. It's not a lot. Like, people think tackles inside 50. Oh, Jesus Christ. They're probably going to have like 5 tackles a game. It's not. It really isn't. All you are talking in the terms of what players have got to do is they're only getting around, the good players are only getting around 1.5 and below. If you can get 2 guys, 1 and a bit tackles a game, you're laughing. You are laughing. Like, the best at the moment is 2.08 in the league. But the majority of goods, pressure small forwards, about 1.1, 1.28, 1.3. So you think 1 sodding tackle in the forward line a game.
Exactly right. And then
it's not rocket science.
No, exactly right. And if you get those, if you also add into that midfielders or those mid forwards that you speak about as well, Pommy, around the stoppage too, then that number also increases. So if you get an extra 2 to 3 players in that midfield, when the stoppage actually occurs inside forward 50 in your front half, that number will naturally spike anyway. So, you know, and we're going to get into those plays soon as well. But is it easily fixable? Potentially.
It is if you've got PPI on the case.
That's a fair point.
So then we've got the final department. Now, this one's going to come as a surprise. Perhaps the most surprising area for a lot of you watching this is the Carlton Ruckstocks show that in this department, they do need a little bit of help. It's interesting when you look at the combo of Pitternet and TDK, between them, they actually do have the numbers required. But based on historical progression, they do look like they need someone who's going to consistently bring tackle pressure to stem the flow in the middle of the park, or at least help develop this. Now, that's a key word there. I'm not saying to trade TDK. He's still your pretty little giraffe who's the future of Carlton. But what I am saying is Pitternet is brilliant at what he does. The thing that killed him last year was his hit-outs to advantage. He got a lot of them, but they always went to the opposition because the midfield didn't collect on it. So there is something that either is a consistency issue, a workout issue, or 3, it's a midfield issue, or 4, it's all 3. So Carlton have got to look to address that. And I would say that you have to look there at an experienced ruckman who can train with them day in, day out. Cruiser isn't that. Remember, Cruiser is a coach. Most top teams are playing 2 ruckmen now. So there is an option for TDK and Pitternet moving forward.
Yeah, there is indeed. And I think they would benefit greatly from someone coming in and actually being out on the ground with, you know, maybe TDK and that ruckman, or it might be Pitternet and that ruckman. And then the long-term idea behind that is to build the development and the deficiencies that TDK and Pitternet have in that God's print that we mentioned with regards to what rucks need to increase or to improve on in order to become a premiership team. I think within the years that does occur, then those two can build up because they're still relatively young as well, Pommy. You know, TDK is only, 20, 21, and Pitternet is still very inexperienced and young for a ruckman. You know, he's only 23, 24. So both, you could say, have potentially, if they do hit their straps, 8 to 10 years in the system.
Mate, the happy medium is literally the maths teacher at school. You've got the old one, the young one, and then you've got the one in the middle. That's the ruck. That is the rucks. We've got the baby. We've got the one in the middle. We need the old cantankerous boo who gives us homework on a Friday because she has no life. We need that type of ruckman. Shout out to Mrs. Drury if you're watching. You are an evil witch. But yeah, so honestly, you need the older one. So a good example for this would be Stephen Martin, who went to the Doggies, who incidentally looks like he's pushed English out in what they're trying to achieve because it's worked so well that now English is getting half the ruck time and they're floating Norton through there. They're really taking to that ruck ideology. But it is definitely something that I'd say Carlton have probably missed the trick on. I know there was some talk on the radio today that Aaron Sandilands. Imagine.
Wouldn't that be some sort of acquisition, Pommy?
It would be brilliant if we were doing this on the 1st of September 2011. But unfortunately, we're doing it in 2021.
Yeah, exactly right. So
what do all these stats mean? It's good as talking about it, but me and Paolo are going to put our mind to rest. So you've heard of Moneyball. Moneyball's good, but it isn't as good as Anglo-Italian ball.
Pommy, hold on. I think I'm going to have to change beanies for this. Wait, hold still. There we go.
Hey, there we are. All of that. Get that around you. Get that around you. Yeah. So what we've done here is we've used this data. Now, this is where my mate Bruce came in. What we've done is we've identified, and I've used him as a guinea pig because he is a stats man, and he has highlighted players based on the recommendations that I spat out at him, and he's confirmed that he got 90% of this right. 90% of this right. So he knows nothing about football. Trust me, he's a proper stats nerd as well. He doesn't know anything about sport. He thinks sport is playing World of Warcraft. So literally, he's a good guinea pig. Right. So what we've tried to do is I've gone one budget option, one internal option, and one draft option if I can find it. So the first one for our backline is Brody Kemp. So obviously one of the pluses is he's free. He's a great user of the football, strong transitional gains, and he's very strong naturally already at the 1%ers. And we know he attacks the ball really well, silky mover. So he could be the answer for the icing on the cake down the back.
I think he is the answer, Pommy, and I think in the 2 games that we saw of him, I know against the Giants there were maybe 1 or 2 times where he just got maybe sort of outdone by his key forward opponent, but what we saw from him and his competitiveness as well at the contest too is something that I think is underrated as well. So, look, Pommy, we know in his draft year he was really, really highly touted before he did his knee, and guess what, Pommy? This was one of Sauce's moves.
Hey, Sauce reference. Nah, big fan of Brody Kemp. If people remember me and Terry doing these videos when we drafted him, it was a guy that I was like, I reckon he'll slide because of them injuries. And if we can pick him up, he's a jet, and we got him. I mean, you only had to see the spin he did.
Oh.
Kid's something else. And I'll tell you what, you win flags on the back of a player like this, down the back, because this kid, I'm not blowing smoke up his ass, could be something special, very special. This is the kind of guy that wins all Australians. This is the kind of guy, like how he plays, what he does, he's the kind of guy that stands out. He's basically a bigger Rory lad that you don't want to punch the screen when you see him. He's a very good footballer.
Yeah, and I pray to God that he stays fit.
Fitness regime taking its toll on the players.
God, far out.
But honestly, Brody Kemp is one of the options. And for me, I'm glad you said that because I actually think he's my preferred option. And that is, we don't look at the back line very much, but there is other options as well. This guy here, I tell you what, I've done Daniel Tartaglia a deal. Look how good looking the bloke looks here. I dropped Daniel, if you're watching, 7% on contrast, Tinder profile. Thank me later. Strong overhead, strong 1-1 ability. Now, what this would do is it would free up one of Jones or Wheatering, so you could play Daniel Talia as the lockdown, as the stay at home. And that would free Jones up, particularly Jones, to do his thing. And he's also experienced. He's been around the block a bit. He's going to be able to give, Kemp them lessons, whoever else we might take in the draft. So he is an option. I'm not a fan of this option, but because I make content for everyone, not myself, I've thrown him in.
Well, I think this also comes back to what Sauce described as the placeholder, Pommy. So the guy with the experience and the bigger body to be able to develop, nurture, and help the younger player, which is Brody Kemp. So maybe this could be a secondary option that the club do consider to go down this path with the ability that he can play, as you say, as it says here on the presentation, to free up Jones or Wiedering, and at the same time too, I think we can also add in to develop a guy like Brody Kemp and groom him for that role as well, as you mentioned with what Isaac Smith is doing with Clark at Geelong. So look, I think it's a viable option. It probably doesn't fit in line with us wanting to not go down the recruit path, but I think you can argue that Sauce's placeholder mantra could come through in a trade or a deal like this.
Oh, and I think he's one of them people that say if you get rid of Oscar McDonald, he's the kind of guy that's a natural replacement for him because he is in that area that you need. So even having a guy, one of the advantages here, trying to sell him to myself, is him playing VFL as well. Do you know what I mean? If you pick up a late key defender, pick 60, 70, him working with him one-on-one in the VFL as well is only going to help you down the track.
That's exactly right. And we may even find another defender, or he may even just instill some, just some different standards with some of the younger boys down in the back line as well. So as I said, I think it's a feasible option, but I do agree with you in saying that it's probably, look, I don't think I would rather be backing in someone like Kemp and then using, Jones and Wiedering's experience to be able to help Kemp out. But if Oscar McDonald was to potentially come off the list, I think he would be a viable replacement.
Spot on. And then everyone loves it. It's our yearly Pom falls in love with a defender in the draft. And this year, I am in love with Rhett Bazzo, the big fella. Now, those who had the privilege of watching the under-19s week just gone, this kid is something special. Quick, very slight of foot, very similar to our mate Brody Kemp. He's got very strong aerial craft. He's ready now. He's a natural Jones replacement. He's still growing, and he's an absolute beast in that key position. And he's a huge ceiling. He's got it all. You can see it now. He'd be ready to play as your third tall. I reckon he'll grow maybe 2 or 3 centimetres, which will put him just under that 200 centimetre height, which nowadays, it is important to note as well, every man and his dog is playing a slight undersized player in the key positions. And this could be the one. And you're probably going to get him for a second. And this is the kid, ladies and gentlemen.
Bobby, you're going off tangent now. You're going off on a tangent. I love it. No, this is wherein lies the problem over the last maybe 2 years, is that we actually haven't backed in. There are times where I think we could have gone to the draft and we actually haven't. And I think this is clearly an opportunity for us with regards to trying to get that intercept marking ability up. Which is again another key factor in the AFL Godprint that we've made up here. So, look, I mean, again, I think the beauty about this and relying on a young player such as a Kemp or a Bazzo to come in is that you do have guys like Jones and Wiedering who have been there and done it, and who actually have the AFL experience on our list and are already there to be able to develop a kid like Rhett Bazzo and a kid like Brody Kemp. So I would personally prefer the club go down the path of backing Kemp and then potentially even pick up a guy like Bazzo as well.
Oh, definitely. Like I am on that same plane as you. I think that Kemp is the guy.
Yep.
And I think then what you do is you keep in mind on that. I think Kemp, obviously, he trained all of his youth as a backman. Last year, before he got brutally cut down with injury, there was the chance for the midfield, and that's where they were looking to throw him a bit more into the midfield time. That's probably still going to be a plan for Carlton, I would say. So what Rhett does is it buys you 2 years to get that plan into place, and you've got a ready-made replacement here for Jones, and you've also got someone that can temp in there for Kemp as he gets going, as he develops his game, and as he gets a bit of midfield time going up. So I think for me, if I was doing this option, Kemp is my first choice. I'll throw a second at Rhett. I've got the now and the next step covered.
Now, this also comes back to what you really love in a player and what I really love in a player is that the ability to be able to cover multiple facets on the ground as well. And that's what Kemp also provides too, you know, the ability to go into the midfield and into the forward line as well. So Kemp is the man at the moment.
Oh, 100%. And I think, I hope we go that option. Like, honestly, I think a Daniel Talia.
We need to. This is the nucleus of what premiership teams do and have done over the last decade. They've backed in their drafted players and they've backed in the development of their football club.
Yeah, well, Daniel Talia is a great get. He's a great get, but I just think this is a position where, as we saw on the stats earlier, it's not that drastic. It's not that we're not looking at that position at the moment and saying, Jesus, we need an intercepting backman now. This is something that, you know, we can sit on for a couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, going back to it again, it's more about what we're doing up further field, because if we were so much better defensively in our front half and the way we set up defensively in our front half, you've got those two guys there already in Jones and Wiedering who, you know, they are brilliant interceptors, but it's the way we set up forward of centre, Pommy.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're going to the forward of centre now, so let's just go back to this. We remember our mids and the core data was saying that our clearance and our tackles definitely needs improving. Yep. And we've got a couple of question marks on our inside 50s and contested possessions. So it is important that we're looking at the tackles. The tackles need to be increased. So that in mind, let's have a look who the Anglo-Italian ball picked out. So the first guy is Luke Dunstan. Now, I don't think this will surprise many people. I mean, Luke Dunstan, for me, he's strong inside 50s. He rates elite for that. He rates elite for pressure acts. And he's 0.1 tackle away from elite in midfield at 4.9. So remember, we need a 5 tackle man. Here is your ready-made 5 tackle man.
Yep. And he is also, look at that third point there. And this is where we talk about, Pommy, this is what we talk about, how certain players have deficiencies in their game and certain players need the backing of teammates and a system to be able to play at the optimum level of their strength or of their strengths the strengths that they actually bring to the football team. And this third point here creates pockets of space with his bodywork. Now, what player is that going to suit perfectly? Paddy Dow.
Spot on. It's gonna, and it's probably gonna help a few players out because you also come into the mold there of Lockie O'Brien's helped out. We do need a natural wingman, and he's one of the few on our list. So is that going to help him out? He's going to get the start to get the ball out in open traffic a bit more, bit of protection for him. And one thing that's underrated about Dunstan's game is, I know we've panned it, two-way running. This kid is the definition of two-way running. This guy's got an engine that makes a Porsche feel sick. So he's definitely got the tools that are needed.
Yeah. Now this is, you know, and again, he's not going to cost you the farm as well, Pommy. So you are giving up, you know, you're basically only giving up a wage because we won't have to trade for him because he's out of contract.
Yeah. So he's one of them players that honestly I would look at and say, okay, we don't want to get too many outsiders in.
Correct.
But if you start getting rid of a Nunes and you get rid of a few other of these outsiders that you'd imagine Oscar McDonald's going to go, players like that, there's 2 players off for 1 coming in, and you are lowering your percentage. So Dunstan is 1. Now, I tried to find one in the draft, and there is a few. There's Ben Hobbs and stuff, but I think for what the type of style of football we want to play, I don't think a drafted midfielder will really cut it today. At the moment. So we cheated on this one and we went 2 imports and 1 homegrown. So the other import we're going, and look at him there, like he looks brilliant, doesn't he? George Hewitt, strong tackler. He's a tagger as well. So this is interesting. Carlton have a nasty habit of a guy retiring and then going, oh shit, we don't have a replacement for that mug. And this is the Ed Kerno replacement. And I think one of the important ones here are the last 2. He comes from a youth-friendly system. So he comes from a system that is literally, for the last 5 years, been breeding youth and cultivating them. So he knows the expectation that youth is important. And he gives the ball up first. So you watch Hewitt. When he gets the ball, he's very quick to get rid of it.
Yeah, and that's it. That's going to play in the favour of guys like Sam Walsh, Paddy Dow, Zach Williams, for instance, as well. That the guys who know that, or Hewitt's going to know that. Okay, well, if I go in there hard and I win the ball first, I know that Zach Williams, I know that Paddy Dow, I know that Sam Walsh are going to be the guys to use the ball better than what I do. And at the same time, if you've got a guy like Luke Dunstan in there creating that space, and a bigger body as well, like George Hewitt, creating that space alongside Kennedy and Cripps as well. I think it's only going to benefit our midfield. And this is the area, Pommy, that we need to focus on, the tackles as well. This is such a big area too. And George Hewitt I think he had double-figure tackles in that final against the GWS Giants, which is enormous, I think. So I don't think we have enough of these grunt players to be able to complement the more classy sort of burst type players we have in our football team at the moment.
Well, I mean, he definitely fits the bill, doesn't he? He fits the bill, his experience. I think also one of the other interesting things about him is he has been deployed as a forward tagger and a backline tagger to stop the marauding halfbacks, like we saw Geary was used on Doc a year or so ago. So he's highly versatile that way as well. So it gives Carlton options as well in that avenue, that this guy, he's kind of like an Audi Matt DeBoer, that if you want to, and there will get to a stage where Carlton will be one-on-one comfortable beating any side. It's inevitable. So you need your George Hewitts.
Yeah, spot on. And I think too, the one thing to look out for with George Hewitt, and I think you touched on it before, is that he comes from, it says here, he comes from a youth-friendly system, and he comes from, he may not be the star in the Sydney midfield, but he understands the mantra of team first. And, I just don't think we have enough midfielders and people in our team that are selfless, Pommy. And I think that's where the last point on George Hewitt really comes up, give the ball up first mentality. I think that's such an important and underrated facet as a midfielder, bringing your teammates into it. And I know we keep harping on about this, but, if you know that using the ball forward or going inside forward 50 is not your strength, but your strength is being a strong tackler, winning the football first, and then giving it off to people who you're creating space for, then, this is all about team, mantra. It's not about individuals. It's about team.
Oh, and that's what you're on about. You want these players that kind of like are that symbol of what is important for a midfield. And I think both him, like Dunstan's my favourite out of the two. I think Dunstan just amplifies everything I like and what we lack as a team. But Hewitt is equally as good, very competitive. And you could really make a case for going out and getting both of these players if you wanted to.
Yeah, it could. And who knows, it may end up that way as well. So, look, we are going to lose a couple of players off the list, clearly, whether it's another 5 or 6. So, but I think he'll complement either of them. I think will complement the drafted midfielders that we have in our group very well.
And our homegrown product is none other than the Stock Dog.
Oh boy, this is well, we don't really need to say much about him. He's built of the right stuff. And now, look, Pommy, I just think it's time to release the shackles with this kid, mate. And enough of this enough of this locking down backline stuff. It just okay. Maybe it probably teaches you a different mindset, but I think he just needs to be released in the midfield because he just looks hungry. And what I think is he's the all round package, Pommy. He's really tough inside, as it says here, but he uses the ball better than anyone on our list, I think.
He does, yeah. And I think one thing that's underrated about this guy is he actually in the last 3 games led our club for Shepherds off the ball. And that is a really, I think, underrated part of the AFL for players.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? For players.
You mentioned it with regards to Ollie Wines. Obviously, granted that Ollie Wines' development is far more in advance of what Liam Stocker's is. But I think it's those little that would probably fit the category of 1%ers, Pommy, and it's those little things there that really just open up the play for the rest of your team and flowing forward and being more efficient by using the ball when going inside forward 50 because you create those pockets of space, Pommy.
Spot on. And I think the important thing, and this is my mindset, is I remember watching him when he got the Moorish medal. We talked about it a lot at the draft at the time. This kid is a natural competitive beast. And I'm kind of inclined to say that my preferred option would be him on there. And I would actually only take Dunstan because I don't think you've got an option that's going to be that good in the next couple of years. But I would be saying Dunstan and Stocker, bringing them as a tandem and saying, look, we've got the protection with Dunstan and we're going to use Stocker as a pinch hit, kind of like Whitfield is used for GWS. Pinch hit him in the defence for a bit, put a bit of pressure on the forwards, then send him to the midfield to put a bit of pressure in the midfield. Deploy him on the forward line. People forget this guy is a dead eye when he's in front of goal, as you'll know from the VFL. So he's a very versatile player. And this talk about does he have the engine and stuff? Fuck me. What a load of Thomas the Tank Engine nonsense. Like, just burst play him.
Well, you also made mention of this as well, Pom, is that we have very minimal rotations through the middle of the ground compared to a lot of the top teams.
Yeah, it's because Russell's evidently a genius.
Was.
Yeah, was. All right. Well, then we go on to the forward line. Now, I'm so proud of this pick. This first one is so outside of the Pom box. Like, honestly, I reckon there is a religion set up because of this. Ladies and gentlemen, Robbie Fox. Now, I'm going to defend myself because you've laughed, which means you're like, what the fuck has Pom done here? I will tell you for why, right? Converted defender to now forward, averaging just under AFL's elite 1.7 tackles. Top 5 for pressure acts from the forward line. This guy is a natural pressure barometer. He's on the rookie list at Sydney. He is literally your nana's canary. He is budgie. I tell you, proper budget, cheap. Everything you want about a player. How could you not like Robbie Fox? And he's going to be dirt cheap, and he comes from that youth system. So he's used, and he's been slowly phased out by Sydney because he's used to being that guy that place holds for the next gen. What better person in the AFL for our boys to learn than Robbie Fox?
There you go. You found one, Pommy. That's a Pommy pick. That's why we have come up with this investigative show, because you just go off and go and do all these great things. And now talk about left of field. This is more left of field than communist Russia, I think.
It's that left that we're almost fascist. You know what I mean?
So, but see, these are the chaotic moves and the moves that no one thinks about. That can, it's about, Pommy, it's about finding what your deficiencies are and finding players that fit the system. I mean, these types of players here may not be superstars or anything at their own clubs at the moment, but if they fit in and are going to alleviate the deficiencies in your side, then you've got to go for it, don't you?
I'm with you. And you look at how he's used at Sydney, particularly what he's strong at. It's basically he's the defensive forward, which I think when I look at Durden and Honey, I don't want them being defensive forwards. I liked what we saw against St Kilda, where they're both manhandling people together and then picking up that loose ball and snagging. I want a guy there permanently to be no goals kicked. You are bringing that heat. Every time a halfback gets the ball, I want you in and around them, getting stuck into them. And he's a natural provider, elite for goal assists, just under elite for score involvements. He's a natural bringer in of players. I think Robbie Fox, cheap as chips, Fox in the box.
It's Pippo Inzaghi reincarnated.
mate, Carlton, if you're watching this, buy him. It's brilliant. It writes its own. And then our own Fox in the box, left field again, Edward Kerno, right? Now, it's been trialed the last couple of weeks, and people don't like it. But if we're bringing Stocker up forward, we're bringing Luke Dunstan back into the midfield, why not? We've got him for a year. It's a placeholder from the list and a bit of experience there, because now that forward line is very raw with Eddie going. So we've got that little bit of leadership there. He's a natural tackler. He's shown he's got goal craft. And I think it's a good little string to our bow. I like this.
Mate, how good was he in that last game against GWS, mate? He didn't miss. He was even
Charlie Kerno, who?
He was even selling candy and kicking bananas. So,
well, I mean, I just think it's a wise decision.
Do you remember what Bolton was trying to do? I think was it in 2019 when he actually deployed Ed Kerno forward. You could see what he was trying to do with that, and this actually could work, Pommy.
I think Bolton was a genius, and no one gave him the credit. He saw that games are won nowadays. It's nothing to do with your defensive structure. It's nothing to do with your midfield structure. Good teams tackle hard. Like we saw, 74% increase for Richmond to win a flag. Do you know what I mean? Over 40% needed to go from 9th to 8th. This is the key metric. This guy tackles. This guy brings the pressure. He knows where the goals are as well. If you add, say you have him, Jesus, Fox in the box and Durden, forget about it. It's the new mosquito fleet.
Mackay as well with Charlie roaming around. We were bottom 6 this year. Pommy was. So I think it's the natural progression.
That's it.
I mean, yeah.
And I like it. And he's already on the list. And I think it works two ways when I think about it. It brings that added experience into that forward line. I mean, it's interesting to remember as well, Charlie Kerno averages just under 2 tackles a game. So it's about 1 tackle inside 50 that works out to, which is astronomical for a key forward. So we don't have to do much work, and Ed might just be the little cog.
Could be. I like it, Pommy. Really like it.
But I've saved the best for last.
This is your...
This guy has turned me on for a long time. Like, honestly, I don't do draft comparisons, but just imagine Dustin Martin without shit tattoos. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Rochelle. Now,
special.
I couldn't capitalize wow factor enough because he's got it. He's got it. And those who know Uncle Pom know he spots the small forward. All the small forwards on our list. Pom cold. Here's your third. This kid, he's got it all. On baller, converted to a forward. So that is even better because Carlton love converting players. Someone's done it for us. Right? He's a natural beast as well, contested. I see 2 or 3 years' time, you're going to see a Jordan DeGoey about him. You're going to be able to start him in the forward line, fling him back into the midfield. It's going to be a real impact player. But for now, he's got real elite pressure act numbers. They're not quite translating into tackles, but they are translating into tackles inside 50, which is all that we need. And he is a team-first footballer. He's constantly looking to deliver the ball when he's inside 50 to people in better kicking positions. This kid is a talent.
He's exactly what we need with regards to, the ability inside forward 50 as well, and the pressure too. So, and again, Pommy, this is where we make mention of us going to the draft and developing our own, but at the same time, going to the draft, it's not just about picking up the best player in the draft, Pommy. It's about going into the draft, finding the best talent, yes, but also finding the talent that is going to, again, as I said, alleviate your deficiencies and bring strengths into the team that we don't have as well. So, look, I mean, these pressure act forwards, it's a massive part, and it's a huge part of the AFL Godprint and what we need to improve with regards to us winning a premiership and getting into that premiership contention. So, and you saw the number, minus 36% or what it was for tackles inside forward 50. We need an abundance, and you're not going to get, and you even said it in the stats too, the natural development of Honey and Durden, even if they were to show that natural development, is not going to be enough to get us into that mold. We need someone like a Rochelle, and he's also going to be bringing in, as you said, the wow factor, ability to roll through the middle as well. So you go back to that multifaceted player and an ability to play multiple roles at any given time on the ground, and that's what wins you. That's what wins your premierships, Bobby.
Yeah, and we've just used our first two picks, which quickly takes us on, before we get on to the next segment, to this.
Oh,
so this is the deal that's going heavily around. It's just been reported by The Age. It's been reported by the WA news outlets. They are strong in their belief that 625 and SPS gets the job done for Adams, Chera, and pick 27. So bearing in mind, if that goes through, we ain't getting Rochelle, and we ain't getting Brett. We ain't getting anyone, really. And it's important to note that that is incidentally 30 points if you undervalue SPS and what he would be worth by the AFL metrics, more than they paid for Neil.
Now, also, Pommy, we went through this before we started this video. Does Adam Chera actually add to any of the deficiencies that we have in this midfield with regards to tackle numbers as well?
No. Short answer, no. Adam Chera isn't known for his tackle pressure. He rates bang AFL average for tackles, bang AFL average for pressure, and below average for tackles in the forward half of the ground. So he basically is what we have a lot of. So Adam Chera, for me, his value might be a first, but I think when you do, there's three values we have to look at in the AFL. One, the value to the club selling. One, the value to the club buying. And three, the fair value, which is probably somewhere in the middle. Yep. Do Carlton need what he brings? And I think the way Carlton are, it's got to be on what he brings today, not this bollocks of 2 years' time he might be a Brownlow medalist. It's got to be what he brings today. And as it stands today, I don't think we can afford to take another punt.
Well, Pommy, we're giving up pick 6 for a bloke that we're saying, we think he's going to be a good player. We need to give pick 6 away for a guy who already is a gun. People saying, but look, Richmond gave up, what did they give up for Prestia? Pick 6 or whatever it may have been. But he was already in the elite category. Adam Chera is not. And this goes back to the areas in the midfield that we need to improve that are actually going to get you towards that premiership. And Adam Chera is not, he's not that, Pommy. I mean, he may be a good footballer, but to give away all those picks and basically give away a draft, and I would even argue too, and if you go back and look at the numbers, there is nothing that Sam Petrevski-Seton hasn't done in the midfield that Adam Chera has done. Chera may have been doing it for maybe a little bit longer, but I'd vouch to say that if we were to actually keep SPS and actually try to develop him into that midfield, and go look at SPS's tackle numbers when he actually plays in the midfield. They're astronomical. It's ridiculous. There was a game. There was a game where he had about 10 tackles or 12 tackles. So and he's brave as well. And ironically, as soon as David T came in, he came out of the midfield, and his numbers have just gone. Well, under a new coach, he could be a different player, or back to the player that we drafted and the one that we know that we're going to get, or the one that we were trying to develop.
Well, I mean, it's weird because, like you say, I think what is really interesting about him, about Adam Chera, is you actually just look at him and then you look at, like you say, SPS and where he was as a player.
Mm-hmm.
I do find it just really bizarre that we're looking at him, that we're looking at Chera, because there's nothing that when I look at Chera's numbers, I don't go, wow. He's not the player that stands out for me. And it's funny that you say these two because there isn't a lot separating them, even with the depreciation of SPS's numbers because he's been a full-time defender. There isn't a massive gulf in where he was to where he is. And I think it's a risk. I think it's a risk. I speak to some WA scouts and they actually said that if they can throw in him for Chera, that they've massively won the deal because they highly tout SPS. They are very impressed with what SPS is about. So I worry, and I'm with you on this. I just think it's a very dangerous game Carlton are playing for a player that is hella overs. Like you're talking 1.2 disposals is the difference career between him and SPS.
I mean, and then the argument from people is that, but we took Dow in that draft, and Chera and Luke Davies-Uniacke are much better players than Dow. I mean, are they? Really?
Can I just say, no one in the right mind would have put Dow not to where Carlton is based on what we needed at the time. Dow was the obvious pick. Like Jaden Stevenson would probably be the other argument that could come into that because we did need a small forward or a wide player. But you would say that you understood the logics of what Carlton were building and they would need someone to break lines. And between them both, even when you go through that draft profile, the upside is all with Dow. And it's great to sit here 5 years later and know, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. I mean, unfortunately, when you go to the draft, they don't give you the stats 5 years' time.
Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future. We've got the sports almanac, Pommy.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? You get Biff there. I mean, he's telling you.
Back our own in. Back our own.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's it. And like for me, I think to talk about Chera just quickly, the logic is he's out of contract. So a lot of people are saying, you've got to be fair. Carlton can't use the PSD. It's underhand. We've got to show that we're accommodating. Two things to that. One, it's 2021. There's phones. We can ring Chera and say, look, we still want you, but pick six gets us a Rochelle, which then gives you some quality to kick into. Or we split it up and we get a Gota and we get a Bazo. So in the future, you've got an elite player behind you and you've got a real strong bull with you on the ball. You can talk to him. And two, would you pay 20K for a car knowing it was going to scrap in a week's time? It's a second rounder max and you rip them off. Yeah,
well, absolutely. Well, what did Sauce do in the draft? He did that. He was a hard man to bargain with. And look, I mean, to give up, not just give up pick six, but did you see the deal that you put up on the screen? It's madness.
I mean, this is as close to that's as close as you get.
Madness.
Fans.
It's fucking madness.
You know what? It's quite hard to get pissed at and to get kicked out of a pub in the UK when you're pissed in the north of England. But you propose that kind of deal, you'd be barred.
Oh, mate. Not for me.
That is, honestly, if anyone thinks that's a good deal and they're not a Fremantle fan, come on. I know lockdown's tough, but get a better habit. That's all we'll say. So you can't do Chera. Chera's for free. So just imagine we could do this and you can get Chera for free. And I always think the best thing in the world is, from playing fantasy sports a lot, is when you rip someone off. It's a great feeling in trades. I love it. I love doing a trade and then realizing I've ripped them off.
This, I pray to God, I pray to God that the club do not make the desperation move. We just have to get a player. We just have to get a player.
You know what? In protest, if Carlton give a first rounder future or this year for Chera, I'll turn vegan.
No, you won't.
Promise to God. Promise to God. Promise to God. I'll do it in strike. And I won't stop eating, and I won't eat meat again until Carlton trade him.
Mate, I think we are. We're playing with fire with this deal at the moment. So I worry gravely as to what may be. I mean, but again, he's not going to. I don't think he's going to add to anything we don't already have, Pommy. That's what are you going to spend? I mean, his numbers.
He's the top player.
What are the numbers being branded about Chera with regards to his contract?
It's like 750.
Whatever it may be, say 6 or 750, right? And his numbers are actually no better than maybe a Dow or an SPS, at sort of similar stages in their career, or they're not numbers that SPS and Dow couldn't achieve. Would people really want to pay Dow and SPS or midfielders like that $700 a year?
Oh, you're right.
Mate, I'll tell you what, if that happens, whoever Adam Chera's manager is, mate, get on the blower to me because, mate, I'll hire you straight away. Sorry, Rash.
Well, I mean, that's the Chera, but we have one more position we haven't done, and that is the ruck. So we know the ruck options were something that we needed to look at briefly. So there are some options for us. Now, we talked about pick 6. This might be someone. I know Paolo will love this because we were discussing this the other week.
Mate, if we can get mate, this is look. If we can get someone like this will be enormous. I mean, I think this is a pipe dream. But see, this is a type of player that you would probably give pick 6 up for. I would say, Pommy, potentially.
Well, this is someone that they're talking about is disjointed. The dog is. He's not happy that he's been moved around pillar for post. He is a ready-made ruckman. He was touted to go off, and a lot of the AFL media now are saying he's not being utilised correctly and he needs a change of scenery. Great tap ruck work. He works with a very talented midfield, so we're building the similar thing. Up and down the ground, he's basically, I think, he is a junior cruiser. He works up and down the ground very hard. I think he's a very good player. And he is someone that I think you've got a bit of movement here if you do trade a pick 6 for him.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly right. And he's also got an ability to go forward and take a mark and kick a goal as well, which is, I think it's something our rucks have sort of struggled with over the last, couple of years. I don't think Pitnet, look, I think TDK is being touted as that, but I don't think, hasn't really showed any of that this year. But, I think this is an area where you speak about, you need that experienced guy, the guy in the middle, and then the young raw product. I think he's going to be the perfect guy to really bring on potentially these other two ruckmen in Pitnet and TDK. And I think he's more the pure ruck and probably the better with regards to ruck craft than what Pitnet and TDK are at the moment. So, and I think a player like him, you look at hit-outs to advantage. I mean, he's going to bring that to the club, I think. So, that is a big area that we lacked in, or it's an area that Mark Pitnet lacked in for me.
And it's something that you can manipulate because they're going to lose their first this year because they're going to bid for Darcy. So I reckon that plays our future first into play. So we can offer them a future first in this year's second, get him over. They know that they're protected next year because they know that at first this year, they're probably going to have to do a bit of manipulation to avoid the owing the AFL something. So you may get him on the fly where next year's draft class currently, based on the limited games they've played, doesn't look to be as strong as this year's. So it could be a chance for Carlton in that avenue for them to feel a little bit confident in. And I think if it's the right price, a lot of the ruckmen now are playing a Tim English and a TDK in a joint role. You look at a lot of these ruck teams now, they're doing it. So then you can slot both English and TDK have a habit of going forward and kicking goals. So it creates huge options in your ruck department.
Yes, exactly. And you look at Melbourne and Port Adelaide. Obviously, Port Adelaide have got Lysette and Laddams, and Melbourne also have Max Gawn and Luke Jackson as well. So I think these two, and I think what the good teams do as well, Pommy, is that they also float that ruckman down back when they need to as well, which I think Melbourne have used to great effect this year too, with Gawn sort of being thrown down back late in quarters when they're trying to protect the scoreboard. And I think that's something that Tim English can definitely do, and it's something that TDK can do as well.
No, mate, I am 100% with you, and I am a big fan. I am a big fan of him. Now, you talked about players that swing down the back. We've got the legend that is Peter Laddams. Now, Laddams quite often at Port is the backstop. He goes back, he sits in front of the back line, and he sits there and he just stifles that entry. Strong ruckcraft, useful forward off the ball. And I think one of the things is when you look at these players like your Soldos, who are out of contract, your Choles, players like that, this guy, I feel, could be a primary ruckman. I actually think you look at his ability, I think he could be a full-time ruckman. The moment he's kind of that hybrid, like Levi Casbolt, here, there, and everywhere, like the Licorice All Sorts type player. I think this guy's natural ability says he could be a full-time ruckman. And if you remember against Port, I was on the Blue Abroad show and I was like, they've got Peter Adams playing in the ruck, Terry. That guy's Mickey Mouse. I'd smash him for 50 hit-outs. And he turned into Brody Grundy. So, I mean, this is an option for Coward, and he would be cheap.
Exactly, and that's the thing as well. He is covering up a deficiency that we have. He's also improving the percentages that need to be improved within the ruck, within the ruck criteria that needs to be improved with regards to a premiership. And again, Pommy, as you said, he come cheap as well because he's arguably, I mean, he's the second ruckman at Port Adelaide with, I think, and it says here, I think he's got a lot of scope as well because he's still very inexperienced as well. But I think he's shown an ability this year that I think he plays with an attitude and with the ability that I think exceeds the experience and age that he currently is and has.
Mate, I'm with you. And I'm a big fan of Laddams. I really like what he does. I think he's got a lot of talent. And I think he's the kind of player that, because he's not going to cost a lot, you don't really feel that bad about paying for him, do you?
Correct.
Like, I don't think you feel that bad.
Yeah. But again, Pommy, it's about identifying what you actually need rather than going out and trying to get that flashy type that you're going to have to give up a lot for.
I mean, he's definitely there. And our final option, Mr. Worldwide. I love Pitternet. Like, honestly, like, you know, he's got one of them faces that when you see it, you're just happy. Like, I want to be his mate. I love him. Now, we've got Matt Pitternet. Now, obviously, we know that he's strong in every avenue, but hit outs to advantage. So he is actually number 10 in the comp for hit outs to advantage. It's interesting to see. But the one issue with him is our midfield don't win them.
Yep.
So very interesting little snippet about Mark Pitternet there. Also, his body work is really good. His body work is really good. And like you say, you like a ruckman to jump behind the ball. Mark Pitternet does that.
Yes, he does that. He does that often, and I think that's a real strength of his game, Pommy. I also think too, and you alluded back to the numbers or the hit outs to advantage. I think that too is a case of the way our midfield sets up as well. I mean, if you're ranked highly for actual hit outs and low for hit outs to advantage, I mean, isn't that just the case of the midfield being smart and reading that too? Like I think it works in tandem too. And look, I actually think he's, you know, we gave up nothing for him, Pommy, really. And you know, if you go back to remember that pre-season game against Collingwood where he bullied Brody Grundy, if you remember that.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, I think, like we say here, he has not really worked with Carlton's best midfield combo for long enough, and the forward craft. And I think also you've got to think just in total hit out to advantage, he is 10th, right? He's 10th in the AFL, and all the guys above him have played more games.
There you go. So
So that's not average.
He's only played about. I think he's only played about 30 games of football, Pommy, as well. Like he's still, and this is where I also alluded to this, previously, where he's still inexperienced and he's only, 23, 24 years of age. And as I said, I think he's got another 8 to 9 years in the system if we can get him right. And look, mate, again, for what you give up for him, and I'm not of this belief that you have to have an absolute superstar ruckman in your team to be a premiership winning side, right? And it's more just about the areas that you bring in or the strengths that you bring in with regard to those criteria that we need in order to get into the premiership mould, as we keep referring to the AFL Godprint. I think Pitternet does bring that, and I think he's a viable option going forward because, again, he's not going to cost us anything. He's not going to cost us an arm and a leg.
Mate, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, like, when I look at what he is about, I think there is a lot, in my opinion, of potential there. I think if we can get him right, because it's interesting. If he actually carried on playing, he would have been the second most hitouts in the comp. And based on current rate, he would have been second for hitouts to advantage. So he would have been slap bang as a ruckman in between Gon and Nick Nat.
Yeah. Now, I think he could also improve with potentially an older, more experienced ruckman around him. I think that could be what the club may try to go off and venture doing. But I think, look, from my point of view, I don't have too many issues with him. I think if he actually gets a midfield around him with regards to, you said his hit-out numbers are actually quite good. I think if you actually get a decent midfield around him and a midfield set up to be able to understand where he's going to hit the ball, but it's also incumbent on him to be able to realise what the midfield structure is and be able to actually hit to where it's going to advantage our midfielders.
Well, I mean, if you look at his hit-out map, it actually is in the hot zone. It's just Carlton's midfielders kind of go banter mode on it. I mean, yeah. I do think he's the kind of guy that when I look at his raw data, I think you throw a Dunstan at his feet who isn't going to let anyone who gets that ball run away with it. And remember what we were talking about Ollie Wines. Their ruckman drop it in the hot spot, and Wines is there to either get the ball and get it out quickly or create the contest, slow the game down, get the reset so they get the opportunity of a clearance. That is how the top teams play. They don't play risk, they play reward from that situation. Exactly. So I actually think Pitternet stays.
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I think it's more just a combination of things with inside that midfield that has to work in tandem together. Rucks, midfield, structure, the ability to create space for your midfield for the ruckman to actually tap to advantage as well.
Well, I mean, as sad as it is, Paolo, the only thing we've got to do now with the algorithm is work out where a good price is for beers because we've just made a flag.
Well, I don't know if the club are going to go down this path, but if they ever do, we have copyrighted this. And if you do go down this path, you owe us money.
We'll send the boys.
Send the invoice. We'll send the invoice. Yeah.
You know what I mean? All you heard was 17 times.
Look, I mean, clearly, and you were saying too that clubs do not go into this depth with regards to their analytics, right? And you know that the Moneyball thing, it could very well be on here, Pommy. It could very well be on because the areas that we lack in are the areas that the premiership teams have improved vastly from year to year, from the year that they don't win the flag to the year that they win the flag. Those are the areas that they have improved vastly. And those are the areas, ironically, that we are absolutely horrible at the moment. Well, not horrible. Probably the inside 50 tackles is probably the most poor, I would say, or the poorest of the bunch, with the rest that could probably be fixed over this preseason, I would say, Pommy. The forward thing is going to require a little bit of work, and it may take another year or two, but the rest is fixable this preseason or this off-season.
Mate, spot on. I think if you look at, like you're talking about like the EPL and stuff, like, and how they use analytics, you look at Brentford, they have been smashing the Moneyball, and they've actually got one of the professors in the UK that educates people on the Moneyball theory that has helped them do it. Ivan Toney, who's playing for them, was because their coach wanted a player who was Thierry Henry-esque. And N'Golo Conte is a great example for Leicester, signed because Ranieri wanted a player that was like Pirlo with his ability to chase space. Players like that happen, and it's because they find similarities. Like, I'm not saying you're going to find a Pirlo by doing this, but you are going to find something that makes Pirlo good. You are going to find, you want on the ball, we want a strong ox. We're not going to be able to find a player that gets clearances, tackles, and 30 touches. So what we do is we try and eliminate what we need. Tackles is the priority, pressure, and then we back that frees up Dow and has a knock-on effect that way. And that is really the beauty of looking at data. You find, as I've done this research, and as we've done this research, we've seen patterns happen over and over again that some people just probably don't even know they've done it.
Yeah, well, I think Richmond maybe just sort of fell on it in the year that they did, but still, I mean, this is the idea of, okay, well, these are the cards that we're dealt. How are we going to best play our hand and get ourselves to a point where we know that we're going to put ourselves into the best chance, or the best chance of actually winning a premiership with the players that we have on our list? And we keep saying it. It's one thing to have the strengths, right, and to really focus on those, right, and then to just look at the deficiencies and say, well, I'll forget it because of their deficiencies, we just completely, the toys are thrown out of the cot. We throw the baby out with the bathwater and forget it. We don't do it ever again, right? I think this is all about play to your strengths, but also realize that the deficiencies need to be worked on. And it's not about just because a guy has a strength here and he has a deficiency in this part that we just completely get rid of it. It's about a team, Pommy, and the best teams mitigate the deficiencies with other players around them.
Mate, spot on. Your strengths are always going to be your strengths. It's your weaknesses are always going to be a problem. So, I mean, like, that is the thing. Like, we've changed Carlton's algorithm here with the addition of 3 players we like. Do you know what I mean? We've brought in Dunstan, we've brought in Hewitt, we've brought in 2 draftees, and we've kept our team. And suddenly that dynamic's looking better.
Yeah, they're spot on. And I think just bringing in those potential, maybe those draftees or even those recruits as well, you're not going on a recruiting spree, number one. 2, you're keeping the drafted players that you have within your team there. So, you've got that mold of, the 2010 to 2020 teams and how they obviously rely heavily, and the nucleus of their flag winning ability is the core of drafted players that they have at the club who have been one club players. And at the same time, you're also mitigating the deficiencies within the team as well. So I think that's what it's about. It's about, okay, we know that these players are very talented, but they do have areas on the game that, they kind of need to work on. But at the same time, we need to bring in players that are going to support their deficiencies as well. And in tandem, in turn, that is going to just add to the strengths that they bring to the football side.
Mate, I think you've surmised it like a genius, like you often are. And that's how simple it is. So that's what I want the audience to think. It's not as hard. And I think the AFL media sell that message that, Carlton are 13th. They're going to have to go out and buy Chera. They're going to have to go out and buy Buddy Franklin. They need a new ruck. They need Grundy. Like, they really sell that fabrication that you're always far away. But the case in point is, even them stats, 74% for Richmond, 7 tackles. It's not many. It's not many tackles. And you think there's 22 blokes on the field? It's not hard to get 7 tackles. Do you know what I mean? It's what? 0.4 a person on the field?
Yeah. And it's 7 opportunities to set up again, 7 stoppages to set up again, and it's 7 opportunities to set up your defensive wall so you lock it in your defensive half as well. I mean, obviously that is not the only facet that is going to win you a flag, clearly, but it is such an integral part of it, Pommy.
It's easy stuff. We fixed it. I mean, next week we'll be doing the Ghost of Carlton Future, where we try and predict what it'll look like when we win a flag.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting part of it, but it's something that you need to do, Pommy. I mean, if we have this thing, and I think the club is so set in, okay, this is what the situation is, this is what it has to be. they don't actually go ahead and understand what it's going to look like or what they want it to look like going into the future. And even if they do, right, we don't know about it. We don't see it. And I don't think they really have, to be honest. They say, you know, in the Carlton way, it says, oh, we want a flag by 2023. Okay, what does that look like? What does it look like? Show us what it's going to look like.
Mate, I'm with you. But I mean, that's why
it doesn't look like anything.
That's why we've got PPI.
Mate,
answering the questions.
Telling you, we're going to be rocking up in a van at the front of Icon Park, bashing the door down when they decide to give up $6.25 an SPS for Chera.
I'm just going to be eating my tofu burger.
Fuck, oh, mate, I might join you. I may be in a vegetative state if that actually happens. But mate, I'll tell you what, I don't want something like that to happen, because you're selling the farm for a bloke who, you know. But this is not a knock on Chera. This is what people have to understand as well. It's not a knock on Adam Chera. It's a knock on the guys that we actually have there now are producing or can produce numbers that are identical to him, if not better. And they're there. They're already there. And you don't have to pay $700,000 for them.
I think it's a lot as well when you get rid of SPS and basically Carlton won't have a pick till they're till 27, wasn't it? 25?
Correct. And it's not the mould to win a premiership. You still need to be dragging in players from the draft as well, Pommy.
I'm with you, bro. I'm with you. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what they do. Hopefully they watch PPI though, and they're like, right, these guys have nailed it. We'll just make a phone call now to George Hewitt. Get him in.
We can send this into the club, can't we? Tell Terry.
Yeah, we'll send it in. We'll send it in. I mean, if they watch the little interludes as well, the videos and stuff, which we don't have the luxury of seeing in live as we record this, I mean, I think Ken Liddell might cry because, but that's the beauty of it.
Oh, we're holding people to account and giving our opinion based on fact and insight and research as well. So, you know, we've done our dues as, you know, as probably good as any analytic or any, you know, person in the scouting reports and in the scouting world would be doing.
Well, I mean, the main thing is the fans. Let us know who you want. Do you want to go out and spend big on Chera?
Spot on.
Do you want to, or do you want to keep it in ground? Me and Paolo are pretty unanimous, though. Keep it in-house, build from within, and just get some placeholders. The sauce way.
Well, Pommy, we know the sauce way was based on what the premiership molds were for the last, you know, 10 to 12 years. So, look, I mean, if the club want to go out on a recruiting spree and decide to win 10 or 11 games next year, great. Okay.
On that note, we'll be back next week. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got through this, we love you. We'll be back next week, though. Blue Abroad, we'll see you soon.
Hooroo.